In the previous video, we created a sitting down animation for our character and put it into the animator so that the character can go from idle into sitting down, and then it can stand up again when we click on a particular object. So in this video, we'll start adding some code. Now, in order to actually click on an object, which in this case is going to be this chair, if we find that chair in the scene, just double click it on hierarchy to bring it up into focus. In order to click on it, the object needs to have a collider around it. So what I'll do is, with the chair selected in the hierarchy, is to go to the inspector, add component, and we're going to add a box collider. Now that box collider will be centered around the origin. Now in this case, this particular chair, its origin happens to be out here because of the way it was modeled. So we need to move this box so that it sits around here. So it's the same process of moving the box using these controls here to center it and then size it for the chair. Now you might want it bigger if you want it to be more clickable for the user and not such a hard target to click on. So I'll just put something like that. Okay, so that box is pretty much around the chair. When we click on the chair, we should manage to hit that collider box with the mouse click because it's quite big. Alright, so now that we've got that collider, we're going to add some code onto the chair that controls the clicking. So to do that, go into your project and go create C# script and call it sit on with a capital S and a capital O. I've already created it and you'll see it down here. Let me open that up and we can have a look what's inside there. Okay, so let me just get rid of this window. In here, we've got our sit on public class, which is our opening for our code. Inside of this code, we've got a public game object called character. Now, this will allow our chair to point at our character so that the chair can actually control the character. In the past, what we've done is control the animations on the character with script that is on the character. But in this case, this script is on the chair. So the chair needs to know about the character. And that's what this variable at the top here is going to do. Then we've got this Boolean value called sitting on, which will help us to keep track of whether the character has sat down or not. This is not related to our triggers that we created before. Okay, it's a separate Boolean value just for internal use on this script. All right, and then we have an animator variable created so that we can grab hold of the character's animations. Now, as we've done before, in the start function, we're going to set the anim to equal the animator component, but this time instead of going this dot get component animator, we're going character dot because we're getting the animator that's on top of the character. Okay, then there's nothing in the update function. And we're introducing a new function here called on mouse down. And this function is going to run when it registers that the user has clicked on that collider box around that chair. Now, once that happens, it will test if we're not sitting on, then it will set our walking speed to 1 and set our walking to true. And if sitting on is true, then it's going to fire off a is sitting false trigger for our animations. And then it will set our sitting on value, okay, which is this one up here and the one we use in the if statement, to false because we're no longer sitting. Now, you might be looking at this thinking, why are we setting is walking to true when we've clicked to sit on the chair? The reason is that the bot might actually be somewhere else in the scene, and so you don't want it to sit down anywhere. You want it to sit down on the chair. So when we first click on the chair, if we're not already sitting on it, we want to start walking, and we want to start walking towards the chair. Now that code isn't included just yet, so we've only just got the bare bones of being able to click on the chair in here. So let's just save that and go back into Unity, grab your sit on script and drag and drop it onto the chair. Then select the chair in the hierarchy just to make sure that your sit on script is there. Now at this point, you'll see that there's a character exposed variable sitting in that script, and that's waiting for you to tell it about the character, which is our ybot. So if you grab hold of that ybot and just drag and drop it down into that character space, that script will now have access to the ybot's animations. So at this point, when we run it and click on the chair, the character will go into a walking state, or so you might think. So we're clicking on this chair. We've got the code in there that we are saying if we click on the chair, then we should go into walking. But obviously it's not happening. Now at this point, you need to start debugging the logic of your code because there's no errors. If you have a look at the console, there's no errors. And so there must be some kind of logic error going on where we've got our messages mixed up as to what we're sending the bot. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is to go back into your code and go to this on mouse down. We want to check this is actually working first of all. And to do that, we put in a line of code called debug.log and then just put in a message inside double quotes. So clicked on chair. So this code will run when we click on the chair. So just save that and switch back and run. And then click on the chair. And if we go and have a look at the console, we'll see that that clicked on chair is running. So that's not our problem. The on mouse down isn't. Okay, what is actually happening is you have to remember that the bot itself has that controller code on it. If we go back into its controller.cs code, and on update, this is actually doing a setting is walking to true and false. And so if you're not actually walking around, it sets the walking to false. So although we're clicking on the chair, which would set walking to true, in the same update, even though it's in different code, it's being set back to false. Okay, so it's actually negating what we're trying to do because the chair's telling it one thing and the controller is actually telling it another thing. So we need to compensate for this because it's going to be a common error that you get once you start animating your character to move around a lot. And this is really the process that you go through to debug it. Okay, you can't just when you don't have any particular errors or red messages popping up on the screen, it makes it really difficult to figure out where the problem is, and therefore you have to step through your code and make sure the bits of code that you've made to run are actually running the way you expect. And the best way to do that, I find, is to put these debug lines in all over the place so that you can watch the code running essentially. All right, so now what we're going to do is to add some code to say if the chair is in charge of the character's animations, then the code that's in this controller script shouldn't run. So in the controller script at the top, let's create a new variable that's going to keep a track of who owns the bot's animations. Well, the bot owns its own animations, but who's controlling it. So we'll have a public static game object and we'll call it controlled by, and that value that's in controlled by will be the object that's actually running or in charge of the bot's animations. Now down in the update for this, we're going to put a little test before we let the bot have control over its own animation. So we put if controlled by does not equal null, return. So this controlled by value will be empty initially because we're not setting it to anything here. Now we'll get the chair to actually set controlled by to itself when we've clicked on it. And what that will do is it's going to say in this update, if controlled by is owned by something else, so it's not null, it is a chair or it is a box or whatever, then return, which will just throw you out of this update function and won't run the rest of this code down here. So save that. Then we're going to I'll just copy this while I'm here, just to make it easier for myself. Let's go back to the sit on code, which is here. Now, at the point that we click on the chair, we're going to set in this here where we're sitting on, control by equals this dot game object, which will be this particular chair because that's what the code is attached to. Now, the control by itself, you can't just use control by because it's inside of a different script which is called controller. So it's controller dot control by to set the value of control by here that is inside the controller class. Okay, now I understand this will be a little bit foreign if you're not used to programming, and I'll try not to make it much more complicated than that for you. Right, so now that this is, once you've clicked sitting on the chair, is that you're now controlling the animations with the chair code and not with the controller code. Now, at the point, if we click on the chair again, and we go from is sitting to false, that means we're standing up. At that point, we want the chair to let go of control. I'll just go into here and just set this back to null. So the chair no longer has control over the bot's animations, which will release it so that we can use the arrow keys to walk around freely. So save that and switch back to Unity, and let's just try all this out now. So let's play. Now when we click on the chair, the bot's going to start walking. And see, it's just going to go walking off into the distance because it's running that walking animation. If we go to the animator, we can see that it's now looping here. We've set the speed to 1 in the code. We're not using the arrow keys. If at this point you try and use the arrow keys, then they're not going to have any effect whatsoever over the bot. If we stop playing, let's play again. Now let's not select the chair. Then we have our regular control over the bot. Okay, so if we now select the chair, it will start walking. And then if we select it again, the bot will keep walking because of the way we've set that animation up. But we will have a little bit of control with the arrow keys, though he's now run into the chair, so that's not going to work. But the point is that now we can press play, we can click on the chair, start the bot walking, and what we want to do is make the bot walk towards the chair. So to do that, we need to add a little bit of code that will do that for us. Now, the code is already moving the bot forward, walking when we click on the chair. But as the bot is walking, we want to slowly rotate the bot to walk towards the chair's position. So that means not only pushing the bot forward, but also turning the bot to walk towards the chair. Now, the way that we do that is we can use a function called lerp, which is a linear interpretation. And what it does is it slowly makes little adjustments to the bot so that it will turn little by little towards a particular object as it's moving along. So this code will put inside our sit on function because it's the actual chair itself we want to move towards. Let's open that up and I'll show you the changes that you need to make now. So at the top, what we're doing is going to add an extra variable, which is this one. Okay, it's called is walking towards, and we'll set that to false because once we select the chair, click on it, we'll set is walking towards to true, which will trigger our walking movement. So add that line there. Next, down in the update function, we're adding this piece of code. If is walking towards, then we're going to start running a auto walk towards function, which we'll write in a moment. And this will only happen if we've clicked and set is walking towards to true. Now, where we set is walking towards is going to be down in this on mouse down. So in here, we're setting it to true for when we've clicked. And when we're clicking to stand up back here, we're setting it back to false. Okay, so those are the two lines that you need to add into the existing code. Then along with that, we're also going to add this auto walk towards function, which you will insert immediately after on mouse down, this whole one here. Now, very important that you make sure that it's inside this last squiggly bracket at the end, because this squiggly bracket right at the end belongs to the class definition for your code. So it's got to be there, and then this squiggly bracket matches up with that squiggly bracket, and that one matches up with that one. But basically what this code is doing is it's calculating a target direction that we want to go towards, and that target direction is the difference between the chair's position, which is transform dot position, and the character's position. Okay, so this is calculating the vector or the line between the character and where the chair is. Then what it does is it uses a look rotation function, which will slowly turn the character to start looking towards the target, or at least that calculates the angle that you need to turn to look at the chair. So if in this case, just for here, the bot is facing this way, then what we've done is we've calculated the fact that the target direction is here, and the angle that we need to turn around, it will be this angle here. And that's what that code does. Now, we haven't gone into a lot of coding or math in this series, so therefore I don't expect you to understand exactly what this is all doing, except that it's slowly pushing the rotation of the character as it's moving forward towards that chair. Now, what's most important is to check that we've got close enough to the chair in order to start sitting down, and that's what this line here does. So as the bot is walking around and turning towards the chair, we test the distance between the character's position and the chair's position. Now, if that is less than some particular value, in this case I've got 0.6, is that we're saying we are close enough to the chair to consider sitting down on it. At which point we're going to trigger the is sitting in the animation and set that to true, which will start our sitting animation. And at the same time, it's going to turn the is walking off and put it to false to stop us from walking. Okay, we're then going to set the character's transform rotation to that of the chair. And I'll come back to this in a little while when we start to consider how the character should be facing when it sits down on something. And then we'll turn off the is walking towards because we don't want to, and set the sitting on to true. Right, so once you've typed all that in, save it, fix up any little errors you might have had, and just check that your code is correct. Now come back to here and run it. And then when you select the chair, you'll see the bot starts to walk. It'll turn towards the chair. Once it gets in a certain distance, he's going to decide he's going to sit down on that chair. And you can see that he's gone into this sitting idle, which we can see here. Now, this isn't set to be looping, so you can see it's run through once and then stopped. And we can fix that easy enough just by setting the actual animation to be a looping one. And it stops there because we haven't told him to stand up yet. Now, if we click on the chair itself, it will then trigger the is sitting to be off. So I've clicked on the chair. You can see that it actually turns off over here, and then eventually the stand up animation will work. Okay, so just to fix those transitions, remember, if you want to go straight from idle to that, you've got to turn off all of these has exit times in here. And then to make the sitting idle loop, it's to click on that one there in the assets and go down and select loop time in your animation tab and click on apply. Okay, so that's going to fix those things up. In the next video, we will look at positioning our bot so that when he sits down, he actually sits down on the chair, not in midair near the chair.